Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Today in True Crime and Portraits podcast. I'm your host, Jane Flowers. Today's episode is a true crime episode. I will be speaking about the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund in Greenwood, Mississippi, with attorney Floyd Melton Jr. with his law firm, Melton Law, and Trustmark Bank, while I go over quickly with everyone what I'm going through so far with the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department, getting my case refiled with a police report and having it passed on to a detective so the FBI can take on the case with the police and help them properly investigate it. Lieutenant Bankston at the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department says the identity theft associated with my embezzlement case is a civil case, and I have to get an attorney to fight the case because it's not a crime, as I am suggesting. We'll go over in this episode how identity theft is a federal crime and not a civil crime, while you learn more about my case I have with the Greenwood Police Department that they lost. I got nowhere the past 2 weeks with the police in Greenwood, Mississippi in regards to amending my police report that they lost, or have them start a new one to replace the one that they lost. I got the runaround last week with the Greenwood Police Department, which is nothing unusual with them, seeing that they have, from the get-go, been trying to protect the organized criminals involved with my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund. U.S. Attorney Tim Jones in Greenwood, Mississippi also tried to protect them from the get-go too. And when my case was passed on to Jackson, Mississippi, the Attorney General's office also tried to protect them from the get-go. By not investigating the organized criminals is protecting them. It's not rocket science, you know. They don't want to get back in touch with me is because they know I've got a good case and they're going to have to eventually be indicted. The Greenwood Police Department, I suspect, want to prolong my case, not for my benefit, but to help the organized criminals. How hard is it for Officer Reed of the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department, who took my report, to pass it on to a detective in the Greenwood Police Department and have them reach out to me? It's not that hard. Monday last week, on March the 1st, I contacted the Greenwood Police Department around 2 p.m. Eastern Time and spoke to Officer Reed. Later that same day, Officer Reed received a 4-page letter I faxed her that entails the crimes that were committed with the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund. Officer Reed said she looked it over and she'd get back to me. I asked her when did she plan on getting back to me. She said she'd get back to me tomorrow. Guess what? She never got back to me. I called on Wednesday to the police department in Greenwood, Mississippi, and asked to speak to Officer Reed. They told me Officer Reed was out of work until Friday this week. I explained to them, well, she lied to me and she said she would get back to me on Tuesday and she didn't do that. The officer I was speaking to said that she probably forgot to call you back. I don't think she forgot to call me back because I also left a message Friday morning for her at the Greenwood Police Department asking her to please get in touch with me about my case since we spoke on Monday and I sent her a fax. I want to know if she had handled anything yet to do with my case. I called Friday after I left the message with the person at the front desk at the Greenwood Police Department. The lady that took the message said the officer Reed received it. So I still, as of yet, have not received a phone call from Officer Reed about my case. And I seriously doubt she'll ever call me back. I'll just be left in the dark as to what happened with my case. Rather convenient for the organized criminals, isn't it? Thursday, I was able to get Lieutenant Bankston, who works for the Greenwood Police Department, to take my police report by phone and email. She told me she would get back to me at the end of the day about my case. I spoke to Lieutenant Bankston at the Greenwood Police Department around 8 a.m. Central Time and asked her to please investigate an embezzlement, identity theft, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering case with Melton Law Firm and Trustmark Bank. I sent over all the information to Lieutenant Bankston that she needed to file my police report, and I asked her to please hand it over to a detective. I sent her 2 extra emails that were added to the original email about my case. I emailed her and asked her if she received the emails and could she please get back to me and tell me what's going on with my case. I got no response from her. She never got back to me at the end of the day like she said she would. This is nothing unusual with the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department, what I've been going through. I called Greenwood Police Chief Kraft's office on Friday, March 5th, and left a message with his secretary. I explained to the secretary of the chief of police that I'm just trying to get the police report amended and have a new one drawn up since the original one has disappeared or has been stolen or lost. I told her I spoke to 2 different police officers and both of them did not return my phone call. I explained that I sent one officer a fax and the other officer I sent an email. Yet both officers refused to get back in touch with me about my case. I told the secretary to the chief of police that I'm trying to get my police report refiled so I can get it over to a detective and have it properly investigated. I also told his secretary to please let the chief know that there are 2 officers that have been stalling on my case and dodging my phone calls. I asked her to please make sure that the chief gets back to me. Why do you think that the chief and the police officer are not getting back to me? I mean, we all know the answer to that one. If you don't know by now, it's because they are stalling me and my case. Anything they can do to stall me with my case is what's going to happen, and what has been happening since January 2020. I've got so much factual information related to my case that will bring up indictments on the organized criminals that it's not funny. No one, and I mean no one, is going to ever use my mother's name with identity theft again. Attorney Floyd Melton Jr. and his son, Attorney Floyd Melton III, know for a fact that my mother's name is used with identity theft. They know for a fact, and that's why they don't want to give an accounting of her estate. I'm the victim here. I am the one with the breach of fiduciary with my trust fund. When my mother was using Sandra K. Hayes' Social Security number with Trustmark Bank, when she was cashing out my World War II Series E bonds, Sandra K. Hayes was very aware of what was going on. Sandra K. Hayes was never a victim because she let my mother knowingly use her Social Security number. Somewhere down the line, indictments will be brought up for Sandra K. Hayes as well. Just recently, on March the 7th, I spoke to Lieutenant Bankston of the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department. I went out of my way and called her Monday afternoon to speak to her about my case that she refused to call me back about. I asked her why she didn't call me back when she said she would call me back. She said she had to get information from other people about my case, and that would help her decide if she thought it should be investigated with a detective or not before she could contact me back. I asked her, well then, why did you lie to me? I told her, you lied to me and told me you'd call me back by the end of the day, and you didn't do that. Here I am 4 days later having to call you. Earlier that day, Bankston sent an email to me stating that the identity theft and embezzlement case I have with my breach of fiduciary with my trust fund is a civil matter. She said she didn't get back to me because she had to ask people about my case. The end result of her investigation into my case was her emailing me and telling me in the email that my case is civil and that there's nothing she can do about it. She can't have a detective investigate it for those reasons. FYI, identity theft is not a civil matter. Identity theft is a federal crime. I repeat, it's a federal crime because a person is knowingly transferring or using without lawful authority a means of identification of another person with the intent to commit or to aid or embed unlawful activity that constitutes a violation of federal law. I know this. I'm sure most of my listeners listening to my podcast know this as well. Lieutenant Bankston didn't care if the identity theft associated with my case was civil. She just wanted to feed me some bullshit and make sure I ate it. I didn't eat it. I don't plan on eating her bullshit. I'm keeping records of everything that's been going on and happening with the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department and my case. All the records that I'm keeping are for everyone to enjoy on my podcast and help me possibly bring justice to my case and have it investigated properly. My mother, Brenda B. Flowers, and Sandra K. Hayes worked together to embezzle from my trust fund with the help of white-collar attorney Floyd Melton Jr. from early 2000 up until my mother's death. After my mother died August 25, 2006, while she was under the care of attorney Floyd Melton Jr. and his relative, Dr. John Trotter, Floyd Melton Jr. would then later embezzle the rest of the bonds that were left to me and my trust fund by my grandfather and my grandmother, starting around 2007 and 2008. Attorney Floyd Melton Jr. left me no record in the final accounting I ever owned World War II Series E bonds, regardless if my mother verbally told me I did. I found out my mother was using Sandra K. Hayes' Social Security number with the Department of Treasury through a search that I did in November of 2019, looking for my World War II Series E bonds that used to be in my trust fund. For these two reasons, my case should be investigated by the police because this is federal criminal activity that has been conducted. There are other people involved in my case besides my mother and Sandra K. Hayes that will be indicted because my case is 20 years old and it has accumulated massive amounts of criminal activity conducted by the attorneys at Melton's law firm in Greenwood, Mississippi that are running an organized criminal enterprise and the judicial system. Lieutenant Bankston asked me during our conversation over the phone on Monday about my mother's Supreme Court hearing that was related to the accounting of her estate. I told her yes, I was not allowed on an accounting of her estate per the Supreme Court order. But what has that got to do with the breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund? I told her. I also said, why can't we stay on the same page here? She got off the page and started talking about something that has nothing to do with my case. I asked Bankson, who told her my case was civil? She told me that she's not at liberty to tell me, and that she was not going to tell me who told her that it was civil. But she did speak to some detectives in the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department, and they verified that it was much so indeed a civil case. She stated she spoke to some other people that said they verified that it was indeed a civil case as well. I asked Bankston, what did you call the FBI? Did you ask them if it was a civil case? Because when I went to the main FBI branch in Miramar, Florida, and I took all my documents about the identity theft and my embezzlement case associated with the breach of fiduciary I had with my trust fund with Melton Law Firm and Trustmark Bank and showed it to the FBI, they said that I had a case. So why is it the police don't see I have a case, but the FBI do? Not only that, the Secret Service saw that I had a case as well. Secret Service agent Roger Kirby, who was working on my case, was ready to subpoena the Department of Treasury for the information about the bonds that my mom cashed out under her name and Sandra K. Hayes' Social Security number until suddenly he got orders from the U.S. Attorney's Office to stop investigating my case. I had to call the Secret Service in Jackson, Mississippi, and report the agent because he sexually harassed me. I wonder sometimes if my reporting him for sexually harassing me with his comments about my breasts was the reason that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford, Mississippi had him close my case. I'm not sure exactly why the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford, Mississippi told Secret Service agent Roger Kirby to no longer work on my case because they never would give me an explanation as to why they closed my case when I received an email from them last year stating it was closed. I even inquired by email to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford, Mississippi, asking them why they were no longer going to help me with my case. The only response I did get back was them saying there's no criminal activity being conducted. Well, if that's the case, how is using someone's social security number and opening a bank account up with it when it's not their social security number to begin with is not considered criminal activity? I wouldn't know, to tell you the truth, but I do know the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford, Mississippi, are dodging me just like I got dodged last year by the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department. Greenwood Mississippi Police Department lost my police report, so here I am again, trying to get my police report refiled so I can have the detective open the case with the FBI, who said they are more than ready to take on the case with me. They already told me this, but the police in Greenwood, Mississippi say there's no crime being committed and it's all civil. Me, in my opinion, because I'm not getting very far or anywhere currently with the police in Greenwood, Mississippi, having them investigate my case is because I suspect people are getting paid off. Who knows what these criminals that I'm going up against are doing? They've even already had their middleman, Derry Johnson, threaten my life verbally over the phone. That was another thing that I mentioned to Lieutenant Bankston. The death threat I received from Derry Johnson. I asked why they wouldn't want to take on my case when I've already received a death threat from these people. My life is in danger, and you refuse to open the case and have the feds investigate it with a detective there with the Greenwood Police Department. They don't care if my life is in danger. Does she care? I seriously doubt it. Lieutenant Bankston spoke to everyone else in Greenwood, Mississippi about my case, but she refused to call me back, and I had to call her 4 days after she received emails from me to get information about what was going on with the investigation with my case. Her actions spoke very loudly, so loud that I don't think that she really cares about me and my case. I think she cares about protecting the criminals that are using my mother's name with identity theft and embezzle millions from my trust. I asked Bankston how the identity theft part with my case could be civil, when that's not the only crime they conducted. I tried to get out of my mouth that I did a search with the Department of Treasury in our phone call. I tried to explain to her in the search it identified my World War II Series E bonds that my mother cashed out under her name and Sandra K. Hayes' Social Security number. My search with the Department of Treasury is more proof that my mother was involved within my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund. And the only way she had access to my World War II Series E bonds was through Melton Law Firm, attorney Floyd Melton, Jr. But before I could get the words Department of Treasury completely out of my mouth, Lieutenant Bankston hung up in my face. She hung up in my face the same way Detective Layton of the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department hung up in my face last year when I started to mention the search I did with the Department of Treasury under my mom's name and Sandra K. Hayes' Social Security number. Speaking of Detective Layton, I was going to ask Bankston why she didn't go to Detective Layton and ask him where he got the information that the Social Security number on the bank account statement that I had with Trustmark Bank and my mother was using was indeed a typo. Who exactly verified that the Social Security number on the bank statement was a typo to begin with? Detective Layton should be interviewed as a suspect that might know something about criminal activity associated with my case. Whatever he knows, he needs to be questioned because he was hell-bent that the other person's Social Security number was just a typo on my bank statement. And he needs to be questioned as why the original report is missing. Later, the Secret Service verified the Social Security number my mom was using was not a typo. I wanted to ask Bankston what she knew about that, if she had spoken to the Secret Service yet. There's too much dodging my questions by the Greenwood Police Department. I also wanted to know if she called the Secret Service and got their opinion about my case. She could have easily have called them and found out that the case was indeed not civil. I couldn't even finish a conversation with her. She said she had to speak and I had to listen. I had questions to ask her and she wanted me to listen to why it was a civil case. She told me during the conversation that my mother was using Sandra K. Hayes' Social Security number without her permission. So Sandra is the victim and Sandra needs to report the crime. When Bankston told me this, I was flabbergasted. I came back with, "Well, I thought you were going to say it was a typo." Meaning I thought you were going to say that the bank statement was a typo, like Detective Layton said it was last year, but you didn't do that. Instead, you're telling me that Sandra is the victim, and my mother was stealing her Social Security number and using it with identity theft. Does it make any sense, any of what Lieutenant Bankston told me? What do you guys think? Meaning that she can't investigate the case because it's a civil matter and that my mother was using Sandra's Social Security number? Therefore, Sandra is the victim, and I'm not the victim? From what I am understanding from my conversation with Bankston. But when I got to the part of the conversation when I wanted to talk to Bankston about the search I did with the Department of Treasury, when I identified my World War II Series E bonds that were cashed out, she did not want to talk about that. She quickly, abruptly hung up in my face. Her actions spoke very loudly to me. It was a quick reminder of how I was treated by Detective Layton last year. I have rights just like every person has rights. I have a right to have the police investigate my case. I'm still going to reach out to Chief Kraft and ask him to assist me in getting my police report investigated properly by the police in Greenwood, Mississippi. I've been reaching out to him for the past few days. Do you think he returned my phone calls? Of course not. There is nothing civil about identity theft and using someone's Social Security number to embezzle from someone else. The police need to stop protecting the criminals and start helping me, the victim, by having them investigate my case properly with the FBI, IRS, or Secret Service. I don't think my struggle for justice is going to end too soon. I see that I'm going to have a long battle uphill trying to get justice within the judicial system in Greenwood, Mississippi. The white-collar attorneys at Milton's law firm are all politically connected, and they run the judicial system in the Mississippi Delta. Not only that, we can all see from the way I have been treated by the police in Mississippi that they are honestly, I suspect, running the police department in Mississippi as well. There has been over 20 years of criminal activity with white-collar attorneys at Melton Law Firm, running a multi-million-dollar organized criminal enterprise within the Mississippi Delta. These crooks embezzled from my trust fund millions of dollars and meanwhile have used my mother's name with identity theft. I want and I deserve justice. I need the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department to investigate my case. I set up a petition online at GoPetition called Ask Greenwood Mississippi Police Department to investigate Jane's case and why her mother's name is used with identity theft. I would like for you, the person listening to my episode, to please go to GoPetition website and sign my petition. Later, I will give my petition to the Greenwood Police Department Police Chief and the Mayor's Office and news stations. I've already reached out to the Mayor's Office in Greenwood, Mississippi, and left voicemails on their phone, but they refused to return my call. I'm not quite sure what else I can do. I've even left voicemails and emails with Chief Kraft's office. No one is getting back to me. I doubt they will ever get back to me, seeing they never did before. That's why I have to keep pursuing them and my case. Sometimes I just want to break down and cry. These people are police officers, and they're not acting like police officers. Police officers are supposed to protect us, the citizens, from criminals. Instead, the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department is trying to protect the criminals. Would you please go to my petition and sign it so I can get justice for me and my family with my case? If you go to the site, would you also please comment why you're signing? I would really love to get everyone's opinion on why they feel like my case should be investigated by the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department. If everyone would put in an effort and sign my petition, then I would be able to get some attention from the right people that might be able to get my case moving forward in the right direction. Please help me put a stop to white-collar crime and identity theft that is ongoing within the judicial system in Greenwood, Mississippi. Identity theft is a federal crime and should be treated as a federal crime and not as civil crime, as Lieutenant Bankston has claimed to me. Please help me put a stop to Melton's law firm using my mother's name with identity theft and them embezzling from my trust by signing my petition. I'd like to say thank you to one and all that signed. Your signature means very much to me. I hope you are all able to clearly understand from my observation and me stating so in the podcast what's going on with my breach of fiduciary I have with my trust fund and having the Greenwood Mississippi Police Department properly investigate my case. If you do not understand something, then could you please comment in the comment section if you have any questions for me about my episode that you need clarification on. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and leave a comment. I'll see you next episode. Until then, goodbye everyone.